I've never considered myself vengeful. Not really. But there's something about having the person you trusted most in the world look you in the eyes and tell you that you're boring in bed that changes you. It doesn't just hurt, it rewires you. It breaks something fundamental and rebuilds it differently. 3 months ago, Andrew looked at me across our rumpled sheets, his face a mixture of pity and frustration, and said those words that would end up changing everything. "This isn't working, Mia. You're boring in bed. I need more." I remember how the air seemed to crystallize around us, how my lungs forgot how to function, the way my skin suddenly felt too tight, too exposed, too everything. If I close my eyes now, I can still feel the exact texture of the cotton sheets bunched in my fists as I tried to anchor myself to something solid while my world imploded. But here's what Andrew doesn't know. He didn't just break my heart that day. He created something new, something calculating, something patient. I'm writing this from the bathroom of his new girlfriend Vanessa's apartment. They're asleep in her bed right now, exhausted from the night I orchestrated. The night where she moaned my name instead of his. The night that was just the beginning of my carefully crafted revenge. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to the beginning. Andrew and I met during our junior year of college. He was that perfect blend of intelligent and charming, with a confidence that drew people to him like moths to flame. I was quieter, more reserved, the serious literature major who'd had exactly 2 boyfriends before him. We were opposites in many ways, but there was an undeniable chemistry between us from the start. Our relationship evolved quickly from coffee dates to late-night study sessions to practically living together. By senior year, we were planning our future. Graduate school for me, a finance job for him, eventually a loft in the city. I thought I understood what love was supposed to be. I thought I had found my person. The sex was, well, I thought it was good. Not earth-shattering perhaps, but connected. Intimate. I felt safe with Andrew, comfortable enough to be vulnerable. That counted for something, didn't it? He never complained, never suggested anything was missing. For 3 years, I believed we were building something real together. Then came that Sunday morning. Golden light streaming through the blinds, the scent of coffee from the pot I'd just brewed, and Andrew's face, suddenly unfamiliar in its coldness. "We need to talk," he said, and I felt the first tremor of something wrong. I sat on the edge of the bed, coffee mug warming my palms, and waited. "I've been thinking about us," he continued, his voice measured, rehearsed. "About our compatibility." "Okay," I said slowly, my mind racing through possibilities. "Work stress? Graduate school applications? Family problems?" "The thing is," he said, running a hand through his dark hair, "I care about you, Mia. I really do. But I'm not satisfied. Sexually." The word hung between us. I felt my cheeks flush, my stomach tighten. "What do you mean?" I managed to ask, though I already knew. Already felt the humiliation creeping up my spine. "You're just so predictable. Safe." He was avoiding my eyes now. "The same positions. The same routine. You never want to try anything new." My hands were shaking so badly that coffee sloshed over the rim of my mug onto my fingers. I barely felt the burn. "You could have talked to me about this," I whispered. "If you wanted to try different things." "I shouldn't have to ask, Mia." His voice rose in frustration. "That's the whole point. You're just naturally boring. There's no imagination, no passion. I feel like I'm with a librarian, not a lover." Each word was a small, precise knife. I'd been insecure about my relative inexperience before Andrew, but he had always assured me it didn't matter. That we would learn together. 3 years of lies, apparently. I could barely form the question. Is there someone else? The hesitation before his answer told me everything. "It's not about anyone else," he said finally. "It's about us not being right for each other." "How long have you felt this way?" My voice sounded strange to my own ears, detached, as though it belonged to someone else. "A while," he sighed, seeming almost relieved to be confessing. "I tried to make it work. I really did. But I'm not sure I can anymore." A while. The words echoed in my head. How many nights had he lain next to me, thinking of me as inadequate? How many times had he closed his eyes and wished I was someone else? Someone exciting. Someone who wasn't boring. "So that's it?" I asked. 3 years and you're just done." I didn't say that. He finally looked at me directly. "But something needs to change. I can't keep going like this." It was the lack of outright ending it that was almost crueler, the suggestion that I might somehow transform myself to keep him interested, to be worthy of him staying. "I see," I said, though I didn't. "Not really. Not yet. What followed was 3 weeks of slow-motion torture. Andrew sleeping on the couch, awkward attempts at conversation, me desperately trying to salvage something that was already dead. I bought lingerie. I suggested watching porn together. I even bought a book of sexual positions, swallowing my embarrassment as I handed over my credit card to the smirking cashier. It was pathetic. I was pathetic. And then came the night I overheard him on the phone in our kitchen, thinking I was asleep. Yeah, I know. I'm trying to be nice about it. She's a good person, Vanessa. No, I haven't told her about us yet. One bomb at a time, you know? I stood frozen in the hallway, my bare feet silent on the hardwood. God, last night was incredible, he continued, his voice dropping to that husky tone I once thought was reserved for me. The way you... Yeah, exactly. It's just so different being with someone who actually knows what they're doing. The laugh that followed was like acid in my veins. I'll figure it out soon, I promise. Another week, tops. She's been trying so hard it's almost sad. Yeah, buying sex books and shit. It's like watching someone study for a test they're destined to fail. I must have made a sound then. A gasp, a sob, something, because he suddenly went quiet. I gotta go, he said quickly. I'll call you tomorrow. I didn't wait for him to find me in the hallway. I retreated to the bedroom, closed the door silently, and slid down against it until I was sitting on the floor, knees pulled to my chest. Vanessa. Her name was Vanessa. And just like that, humiliation crystallized into something harder, something colder. He had already replaced me. While telling me I needed to change, while watching me scramble to be enough for him, he was already sleeping with someone else. Someone who knew what she was doing. Someone who wasn't boring. I didn't confront him. I didn't scream or throw things or demand answers. Instead, I did something much more dangerous. I started to plan. The next morning, I told Andrew I thought he was right. We needed some space to figure things out. I would stay with my friend Zoe for a while. He looked relieved, which only strengthened my resolve. I think that's smart, he said, helping me pack a suitcase with an enthusiasm that would have been comical if it hadn't been so painful. Some perspective might be good for both of us. Definitely, I agreed, my voice calm. We shouldn't make any permanent decisions yet. He smiled, clearly believing he was getting exactly what he wanted. Freedom to be with Vanessa without the mess of properly breaking up with me first. The perfect transition. No guilt. No confrontation. I'm going to really think about what you said, I added, looking him directly in the eyes. About me being boring. I think maybe you're right. A flicker of discomfort crossed his face. He hadn't expected me to reference his cruel words so directly. Mia, I didn't mean... No, it's okay, I interrupted. Sometimes we need to hear hard truths, right? I appreciate your honesty. He nodded, clearly relieved that I was taking it so well. That I was making this easy for him. Call me in a few days, he suggested as he helped carry my suitcase to the door. We can check in, see where we're at. Of course, I said and let him kiss me on the cheek. As I walked to my car, I felt his eyes on my back. He was probably already texting Vanessa, telling her the good news. His boring girlfriend was out of the way, at least temporarily. The path was clear. But Andrew had made a critical error in judgment. He had underestimated just how thoroughly his words had transformed me. He thought he was dealing with the same Mia he'd always known. Sweet, accommodating, predictable Mia. That Mia died the moment he called her boring in bed. The new Mia, the one driving away from their apartment with dry eyes and a racing mind, had only one focus now. Becoming his worst nightmare. He said what? Zoe's voice reached a pitch I'd never heard before as she paced around her living room, glass of wine sloshing dangerously in her hand. I'd just finished recounting everything to her, the initial conversation, the 3 weeks of humiliation, and finally, the phone call I'd overheard. Yeah, I said, taking a long sip from my own glass. Apparently I'm a sexual failure, a boring librarian in bed. That absolute fucking asshole. Zoe stopped pacing to look at me, her dark eyes fierce with protective anger. I never liked him, always thought he was too impressed with himself. This was news to me. You never said anything. She sighed, plopping down next to me on the couch. Because you were happy, Mia. And he wasn't openly terrible until now. Just subtly terrible. I considered this. Had there been signs I'd missed? Little moments of condescension or criticism that I'd brushed off as playful teasing. And who the hell is this Vanessa person? Zoe continued, refilling both our glasses. I don't know yet, I admitted, but I intend to find out. Something in my tone made Zoe look at me more carefully. Mia, What exactly are you planning? I took another sip of wine, feeling the warmth spread through my chest. I'm not entirely sure yet, but I know it starts with me not being boring anymore. Honey, you're not boring. Andrew's just an asshole who— No, I interrupted. I mean, yes, he's an asshole. But he wasn't entirely wrong. Zoe looked ready to protest again, but I held up my hand. Listen, I've had 2 sexual partners in my life. 2. And I've never— I felt my cheeks flush. Even with my best friend, talking about my lack of orgasms was embarrassing. Never come during sex? Zoe supplied matter-of-factly. I nodded. I always just thought that was normal, that it was something wrong with me, not the guys. I never wanted to make them feel bad by suggesting they weren't doing it right. Zoe was looking at me with a mixture of sympathy and exasperation. Oh, Mia, that's not normal, and it's definitely not your fault. Maybe not, I agreed, but my unwillingness to speak up about it, to learn what I actually like and ask for it, that's on me. And Andrew was right about one thing, I played it safe. I never suggested anything new or different. Because you weren't comfortable, Zoe argued. That's not a character flaw. No, but it's a limitation. One I'm ready to overcome. I set down my wine glass, feeling more determined by the second. Andrew thinks I'm inherently boring in bed, that it's just who I am. But what if I could prove him wrong? What if I could become, I don't know, really good at sex? Like exceptionally good? A slow smile spread across Zoe's face. Are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting? I'm suggesting I need to educate myself. Thoroughly. About everything I've been too shy or embarrassed to explore. A sexual awakening. Zoe nodded approvingly. I'm here for it. But what's the end game? You want to get good at sex and then, what? Win him back? The very suggestion made my stomach turn. God, no. I don't want him back. Not ever. Then what? I hesitated. The plan forming in my mind was still nebulous, potentially impossible, and definitely more than a little unethical. But the memory of Andrew's voice, it's like watching someone study for a test they're destined to fail, hardened my resolve. I want to prove him wrong, I said finally, conclusively, irrefutably. Zoe raised an eyebrow. And how exactly do you plan to do that without sleeping with him again? I held her gaze steadily. That's where Vanessa comes in. It took her a moment to catch my meaning, and when she did, her eyes widened. Holy shit, Mia. You want to— what? Seduce his new girlfriend? Is that crazy? I asked, suddenly uncertain. Zoe took a contemplative sip of wine. Crazy? Maybe. Diabolical? Definitely. Potentially the best revenge ever? Absolutely. A bubble of something like laughter rose in my chest. So you don't think I'm a terrible person for even considering it? Oh, you're definitely terrible. Zoe grinned. But so am I because I think it's brilliant. He humiliated you in the most intimate way possible, cheated on you, and then laughed about your attempts to please him. He deserves whatever's coming to him. The validation was exactly what I needed. The shame that had been weighing me down since Andrew's pronouncement began to lift, replaced by a strange, fierce determination. I need to find out who she is first, I said, practical considerations already taking shape in my mind, and then figure out how to meet her, get close to her, and learn how to be a sex goddess. Zoe added, can't forget that part. Lucky for you, you're looking at an excellent resource. She gestured to herself with a flourish. I laughed despite myself. Zoe had always been the more sexually adventurous one between us, the one with stories that made me blush, the one who casually referenced toys and techniques I'd only vaguely heard of. I'm going to need all your expertise, I admitted. And probably more. This is going to be a complete overhaul. A sexual renaissance, Zoe declared, raising her glass. To the death of boring Mia and the birth of— what should we call you? Sex goddess Mia? Femme fatale Mia? How about just new Mia for now? I suggested, clinking my glass against hers. We can work up to the goddess title. Later that night, as I lay on Zoe's pull-out couch staring at the ceiling, I tried to process the enormity of what I was considering. Not just the sexual education part, though that was daunting enough, but the revenge aspect. The calculated seduction of a woman I'd never met. It should have made me feel terrible. Predatory, even. But all I felt was a cool, clear sense of purpose. Because this wasn't about sex, not really. It was about power. About taking back what Andrew had stolen from me, my confidence, my sense of desirability, my trust in my own worth. If I could make Vanessa want me, if I could make her choose me over him, it wouldn't just mean I wasn't boring. It would mean I was better. And that was the kind of validation no amount of therapy or self-help books could provide. As I finally drifted off to sleep, one thought circled in my mind like a mantra. Andrew had no idea what he'd created when he broke me. But he was going to find out. The first step in my plan was simple but crucial: identify Vanessa. Given what I'd overheard, it seemed likely she was someone from Andrew's work. He'd always maintained a strict separation between his professional life and our relationship, few work events, rare mentions of colleagues. At the time, I'd attributed it to his focus on advancement, his desire to keep our life together separate from the stress of his finance job. Now, I wondered if the separation had been more calculated. The morning after my conversation with Zoe, I created a fake Instagram account under the name Lily Chen, complete with stock photos of a generic-looking young woman and carefully curated posts designed to seem authentic but unremarkable. Then I followed Andrew. He accepted the request within hours. Typical Andrew, always eager to expand his social network with attractive women, even strangers. From there, it was just a matter of combing through his followers, looking for women named Vanessa who had recently interacted with his posts. I found her on my third day of searching, Vanessa Reyes. Her profile showed a stunning woman with glossy dark hair, olive skin, and the kind of confidence that radiated even through photographs. A financial analyst at Meridian Capital, the same firm where Andrew worked. Her recent photos showed rooftop bars, weekend trips to wine country, yoga poses on beaches. Each one more glamorous and sophisticated than the last. Well, shit, Zoe said, looking over my shoulder at Vanessa's profile. She's hot. Yep, I agreed, feeling a complicated mixture of intimidation and determination. She definitely doesn't look boring. Neither will you, Zoe said firmly. Once we're done with your transformation. The plan we hatched was methodical, comprehensive, and utterly focused. While I continued my graduate studies in literature, taking a reduced course load that I justified to my professors as necessary for personal reasons, I devoted every spare moment to my sexual education. We started with the basics. Zoe took me shopping for an entirely new selection of lingerie, not the modest, practical pieces I'd always favored, but daring sets in jewel tones and black, with cutouts and lace and satin. I drew the line at anything too extreme. No leather or PVC, nothing that felt like a costume, but embraced styles I would have been too intimidated to try before. The key, Zoe explained as I modeled a deep emerald bra with a matching high-waisted thong, is to find things that make you feel powerful. Sexy isn't about what someone else thinks looks good, it's about what makes you stand taller, move differently. She was right. By the third store, I was starting to distinguish between pieces that made me feel self-conscious and those that genuinely made me feel good. The latter weren't always the most revealing or traditionally sexy. Sometimes they were the ones with the perfect cut, the softest fabric, the color that made my eyes look greener or my skin more luminous. But lingerie was just the beginning. Zoe introduced me to her extensive collection of books, from classic texts like The Joy of Sex to modern guides focused on female pleasure. I read voraciously, highlighting passages and taking notes like I was preparing for the most important exam of my life. Then came the practical education. Zoe connected me with her friend Eliza, who ran workshops at an upscale sex shop downtown. "You want to learn about pleasure?" Eliza asked during our first meeting, her blue hair falling in waves around a face free of makeup but radiant with natural confidence. "Your own or others?" "Both," I said, pushing past the embarrassment that still clung to me when discussing such topics. "I want to understand my body better, and I want to know how to be good with someone else." Eliza nodded, no judgment in her expression. "That's actually the perfect approach. The best lovers are the ones who understand their own pleasure first." Over the following weeks, I attended Eliza's women-only classes on everything from the anatomy of arousal to advanced techniques for different types of orgasms. I discovered whole worlds of sensation I'd never explored, learned the language of my own body, and slowly began to shed the shame that had always surrounded sexuality for me. I bought my first vibrator, then my second. I experimented with different types of touch, different rhythms, different fantasies. For the first time in my life, I prioritized understanding my own pleasure instead of worrying about performing for someone else's. The transformation wasn't just physical or sexual. Zoe insisted that confidence had to extend to all areas of my life. The way you move, the way you speak, the way you enter a room, It all matters, she said as she supervised my posture in front of her full-length mirror. Sexuality isn't compartmentalized. It's an energy you carry everywhere. We worked on my wardrobe, replacing my comfortable but unremarkable clothes with pieces that felt both authentic to me and more deliberately chosen. Not provocative necessarily, but intentional. Fabrics that felt good against my skin, cuts that flattered my figure without hiding it. I started taking dance classes, not to perform, but to develop a better relationship with my body, to understand how it moved in space, how to control it with precision, how to find rhythm and flow. All the while, I kept tabs on Vanessa through social media. I learned her routines, the coffee shop near her office where she stopped most mornings, the yoga studio she frequented on Tuesdays and Thursdays, the bookstore where she occasionally browsed on weekend afternoons. I noted her interests, her friend group, the restaurants and bars she favored. I was building a map to her life, a way in. 2 months into my transformation, Zoe decided it was time for a practical assessment of my progress. She took me to a high-end bar downtown, the kind of place with craft cocktails and moody lighting, where professionals went to unwind and flirt. "Tonight is just about confidence," she explained as we claimed a small table in the corner. "About feeling your power and seeing if others respond to it. No pressure to do anything you're not comfortable with." I nodded, surprisingly calm. The old Mia would have been a bundle of nerves in such an environment, worried about saying the wrong thing, appearing awkward, being judged. But new Mia, dressed in a silk camisole under a fitted blazer, dark jeans that hugged my curves, and heeled boots that made me stand taller, felt different, centered, like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. "What are we drinking?" Zoe asked, scanning the elaborate cocktail menu. "Negroni for me," I decided. It was a drink I'd only recently learned to appreciate. Bitter, complex, definitely not the sweet, fruity cocktails I used to order. As we sipped our drinks, I became aware of a man watching me from the bar. Tall, well-dressed, with the confident posture of someone used to getting what he wanted. When our eyes met, he smiled, not the entitled smirk I might have expected, but something warmer, more appreciative. "Don't look now," Zoe murmured, "but you've caught someone's attention." "I know," I said, taking another sip of my Negroni. "The guy at the bar, and the woman in the blue dress by the window," Zoe added. "She's been stealing glances since we sat down." I shifted slightly to observe the woman in question. Elegant, mid-30s maybe, with a quiet sophistication that was undeniably attractive. When she noticed me looking, she didn't avert her eyes. Instead, she held my gaze for a beat longer than casual, a small smile playing at her lips before she turned back to her companion. The realization hit me with unexpected force. I was being noticed. Not just observed in passing, but genuinely seen, desired even. "What do you think?" Zoe asked, clearly enjoying my dawning recognition. "Interesting?" "Very," I admitted. The man was now making his way toward our table, 2 fresh drinks in hand. "Ladies," he said as he approached, "I hope this isn't too forward, but I thought you might enjoy another round." His voice was deep, with a slight accent I couldn't place. Up close, he was even more attractive. Early 30s, with intelligent eyes and an ease about him that suggested confidence without arrogance. "That depends," Zoe said playfully. "Are there strings attached to these drinks?" He laughed. "Only the string of allowing me to introduce myself." "I'm Julian." "Zoe," my friend replied. "And this is Mia." "Mia," he repeated, his eyes focusing on me with undisguised interest. "It's a pleasure." What followed was a surprisingly enjoyable conversation. Julian was an architect, thoughtful and articulate, with none of the aggressive flirtation or obvious maneuvering I'd expected. He asked questions and actually listened to the answers. He made jokes that were genuinely funny. He treated both Zoe and me with equal respect. And all the while, I found myself responding with a confidence I'd never felt before. I held eye contact. I asked bold questions. I let silence hang when it served the conversation rather than rushing to fill it. When Julian eventually asked if he could give me his number, it felt like a natural progression rather than a victory or a threat. "I'd like that," I said, handing him my phone. After he'd entered his information and excused himself, Zoe raised her glass in a toast. "Look at you," she said proudly. He was completely captivated. He was being polite? I demurred, though I knew it wasn't true. The way Julian had looked at me, like I was something rare and fascinating, was unmistakable. "Bullshit." Zoe laughed. "He couldn't take his eyes off you. And not just him. Half the bar has noticed you tonight." I glanced around, realizing with a start that she was right. There was a subtle awareness directed my way, appreciative glances, lingering looks. Not leering or objectifying, but definitely attentive. "It feels strange," I admitted. "Good, but strange. Like I'm wearing someone else's skin." "Not someone else's," Zoe corrected. "Your own. Just more fully than before." Later that night, as we shared an Uber home, I received a text from Julian. "It was lovely meeting you tonight, Mia. I'd really enjoy continuing our conversation over dinner sometime." I showed Zoe, who grinned triumphantly. "Are you going to go?" I considered the question seriously. Julian was attractive, intelligent, and seemed genuinely nice. Under different circumstances, I might have been thrilled by his interest. "No," I said finally. "It wouldn't be fair to him. I'm not available." "Not really." Zoe nodded, understanding. "Because of the plan." "Because of the plan," I agreed, "but also because I'm not done becoming whoever I'm going to be yet. Dating feels like a distraction right now." "Fair enough," Zoe said. "But just so you know, tonight was proof. The transformation is working. You're different now. Anyone can see it." I smiled, a rush of confidence flowing through me. "Good, because it's almost time for the next phase." That night, I texted Julian back. "I enjoyed meeting you too. I'm not in a place for dating right now, but I wanted to say thank you for the lovely conversation and the respect with which you approached it. That's rarer than it should be." His response came quickly. "I appreciate your honesty. The offer stands if things change. Either way, it was worth meeting you." As I set my phone aside, I realized something important. 6 months ago, I would have either ignored his text completely, too anxious to respond, or agreed to a date I didn't really want out of a misplaced sense of obligation. The ability to be direct, to honor both his interest and my own boundaries, that was new. It was a small thing, perhaps, but it felt significant. Another piece of evidence that I wasn't the same Mia who had sat frozen with humiliation as Andrew declared her boring in bed. That Mia was gone, and the woman replacing her was discovering with each passing day just how far from boring she could be. 3 months after Andrew's brutal assessment of my sexual abilities, I stood outside Empower Yoga Studio in the upscale part of town, dressed in high-end athletic wear and projecting a confidence I was still learning to fully inhabit. According to Instagram, Vanessa Reyes took the 6 p.m. advanced vinyasa class every Tuesday. Today, I would be joining her. My heart hammered against my ribs as I pushed open the door and stepped into the elegant, minimalist space. Bamboo floors, soft lighting, the subtle scent of essential oils, everything about the studio screamed exclusive wellness. The monthly membership fee had made me wince, but it was a necessary investment in my plan. I approached the reception desk, where a willowy woman with a perfect top knot greeted me with practiced serenity. "Welcome to Empower. First time with us?" "Yes," I smiled, channeling the calm confidence I'd been practicing. "I'd like to join the 6 p.m. advanced vinyasa." She nodded, tapping at her tablet. "Have you practiced advanced vinyasa before?" "It's quite challenging." "At Phoenix Yoga downtown," I lied smoothly. In truth, I'd been taking intensive private lessons for the past month specifically to prepare for this moment. The last thing I needed was to look like a beginner in front of Vanessa. "Perfect. I'll just need you to fill out our new client form and sign the waiver." As I completed the paperwork, I scanned the peaceful waiting area. No sign of Vanessa yet. I paid for a month-long membership, wincing internally at the charge on my credit card, and made my way to the women's changing area. The locker room was as luxurious as the rest of the studio, spa-like showers, complimentary toiletries, plush towels. I selected a locker and was arranging my things when the door opened and a group of women entered, laughing softly together. I didn't need to turn around to know that one of them was Vanessa. Her voice, warm, slightly husky with a confident cadence, was instantly recognizable from the Instagram stories I'd studied. I swear, if Jackson sends me one more condescending email explaining something I already know, I'm going to reply with nothing but the Wikipedia definition of mansplaining, she was saying, causing her friends to laugh. I kept my movements casual as I turned, getting my first in-person look at the woman Andrew had left me for. Photos hadn't done her justice. Vanessa was striking, tall and athletic, with glossy dark hair pulled into a high ponytail, flawless skin, and an energy that commanded attention without seeming to try. She moved with the ease of someone entirely comfortable in her body, As she selected a locker 2 down from mine, I allowed myself a moment of doubt. This woman was intimidatingly beautiful, successful, and clearly well-liked. What made me think I could ever compete with her? Then I remembered this wasn't about competition. It wasn't even about Vanessa, not really. It was about Andrew, and the way he had dismissed me. The way he had defined me by my perceived sexual inadequacy. I took a deep breath and centered myself. The new Mia, the one who had spent months learning her own body, developing her confidence and studying the art of connection, wasn't intimidated. She was strategic. I changed quickly into my carefully selected yoga outfit, high-quality midnight blue leggings and a matching sports bra that highlighted my toned arms, another benefit of my recent fitness regimen. As I rolled out my mat in the studio, I positioned myself where Vanessa would be likely to notice me, not right next to her, which would seem strange, but diagonally in front, where my movements would naturally fall into her line of sight. The instructor, a serene woman named Indra, began the class with breathwork. I followed along, grateful for the intensive training that allowed me to move through the increasingly difficult poses with grace. When we transitioned into inversions, I executed a perfect handstand, holding it with controlled breathing as Indra had taught me. "Beautiful form," Indra commented as she moved through the room. "You've clearly practiced this before." I smiled in acknowledgement, feeling Vanessa's eyes on me. When we moved into partner work, my opportunity arrived naturally. "Find someone you haven't worked with before," Indra instructed. "We'll be supporting each other through some challenging balances." I hesitated just long enough for the rest of the class to pair up, leaving Vanessa and me as the obvious remaining match. Our eyes met and she smiled, friendly, open. "Looks like it's you and me," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Vanessa." "Mia," I replied, taking her hand and noting the firmness of her grip. "Nice to meet you." Up close, I could see that her eyes were a warm amber color, intelligent and direct. No hint of recognition crossed her face. Andrew apparently hadn't shown her any photos of me, which simplified things considerably. "Are you new here?" she asked as we positioned ourselves for the partner stretch. "I don't think I've seen you before." "First class," I confirmed, "but not new to yoga. I needed a change of studio environment, something more challenging." She nodded appreciatively. "Well, you clearly know what you're doing." "Your handstand was impressive." "Thanks," I said, allowing a genuine smile. "It took a lot of practice to get there." We moved through the partner work with surprising synchronicity. Vanessa was strong and centered, making the challenging poses feel almost effortless. When I supported her in a difficult backbend, I was careful to use the proper alignment Indra had taught me, providing firm but gentle pressure at exactly the right points. "Wow," Vanessa said as she rose from the pose. "That was the best supported version of that I've ever done. Are you sure you're not an instructor somewhere?" I laughed. "Definitely not. Just an enthusiastic student." "Well, you've got great hands," she said, then grinned at her own wording. "I mean, you know exactly where to apply pressure." "Thanks," I said, holding her gaze just a beat longer than necessary. "I've been told I'm pretty intuitive about physical things." A flicker of something. Interest? Awareness? Crossed her face before she smiled and turned back to her mat as Indra called the class to attention. For the remainder of the class, I focused on my practice, but remained conscious of Vanessa's occasional glances my way. As we finished with final savasana, I felt a calm certainty settle over me. Phase 1 had gone perfectly. Contact established, interest peaked. After class, I took my time gathering my things, timing my exit to coincide with Vanessa's. As we reached the studio door together, she turned to me. "Hey, a bunch of us usually grab juice or smoothies across the street after class. Would you like to join? It's a great way to get to know the Empower community." "I'd love to," I said, projecting casual friendliness rather than eager acceptance. "Lead the way." As we crossed the street together, Vanessa introduced me to the other women from class. They were welcoming but clearly an established group, their conversations filled with references to shared experiences and inside jokes. I listened more than I spoke, offering thoughtful comments when appropriate and asking questions that showed genuine interest in their lives. At the juice bar, I positioned myself next to Vanessa as we ordered. When she selected a complex green concoction with added protein, I ordered a similar blend, nodding in agreement when she commented on its benefits for muscle recovery. "So what do you do when you're not perfecting handstands?" she asked as we claimed a high table near the window. "I'm finishing my PhD in comparative literature," I said, sticking close to the truth. focusing on how trauma narratives differ across cultures. Her eyebrows raised, clearly impressed. That sounds fascinating. And intense. It can be, I agreed. But I find it grounding to have the physical practice of yoga alongside the intellectual work. Helps keep me balanced. What about you? Financial analysis, she said. I work for Meridian Capital downtown. I widened my eyes in a show of recognition. That's supposed to be one of the top firms in the city. Competitive place to land. She smiled, a flash of pride crossing her features. It is. I worked my ass off to get there. I bet, I said, my admiration genuine despite everything. Whatever else Vanessa might be in relation to Andrew, she was clearly accomplished in her own right. What made you choose finance? As she explained her journey, the economics degree, the internships, the mentors who had shaped her career, I listened attentively, asking follow-up questions that showed I was truly engaged. It wasn't an act. I found myself genuinely interested in her story. She spoke with passion about her work, without the condescension that often accompanied Andrew's rare mentions of his job. When the conversation shifted to relationships, skillfully steered there by one of the other women discussing a recent breakup, I tensed internally, but kept my expression neutral. What about you, Mia? The woman, Lisa, I recalled, asked, seeing anyone special? Not at the moment, I said, my tone light. I recently got out of a long-term relationship that ended poorly. Taking some time for myself right now. Sympathetic murmurs circled the table. Vanessa looked at me with what seemed like genuine empathy. I've been there, she said. Sometimes the best thing is to focus on yourself for a while. The irony of receiving relationship sympathy from the woman who was now with my ex wasn't lost on me, but I pushed aside the twinge of bitterness it provoked. Exactly, I agreed. It's been good, actually. I'm rediscovering parts of myself I had neglected. Like yoga? She suggested. Among other things, I said, allowing a small smile that hinted at more but revealed nothing. As the gathering began to disperse, Vanessa lingered, finishing her juice as the others made their exits. I really enjoyed talking with you, she said. Will you be at Thursday's class? Absolutely, I confirmed. It was a great class, and the company afterward wasn't bad either. I smiled to show I was teasing. She laughed. Well, good. It's nice to have fresh energy in the group. She hesitated for a moment, then pulled out her phone. Would you want to exchange numbers? Sometimes the class schedule changes, or we do weekend sessions together. Sure, I said, working to keep my voice casual while my heart raced with triumph. I recited my number, watching as she entered it into her contacts. Great, she said, sending me a quick text so I'd have hers as well. See you Thursday, Mia. Looking forward to it, I replied, gathering my things. As I walked to my car, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Elation at how perfectly the first contact had gone. Guilt at the manipulation involved. And an unexpected complication, I genuinely liked Vanessa. She was smart, accomplished, and seemingly kind, not at all the shallow homewrecker I had imagined. For a brief moment I considered abandoning the plan. Was this elaborate revenge really worth it? Was I becoming someone I wouldn't recognize? Or worse, wouldn't like? Then my phone buzzed with a text from Andrew, the first in weeks. Hey, just checking in. Hope you're doing okay. Maybe we could grab coffee sometime soon to talk. No doubt his conscience was bothering him, or perhaps Vanessa had asked questions about his ex that made him realize he should properly end things with me before fully moving on. I stared at the message, remembering his voice on the phone that night. It's like watching someone study for a test they're destined to fail. The doubt evaporated. I deleted his message without responding and opened the text from Vanessa instead. Great meeting you today. See you Thursday. I saved her number with a smile. Phase 1 complete, Phase 2 beginning now. Over the next 3 weeks, I carefully cultivated my relationship with Vanessa through yoga classes, post-workout smoothies, and gradually, coffee meetups that extended beyond the group setting. Each interaction was a delicate balance, friendly without being pushy, interesting without seeming calculated, subtly flirtatious without being overt. I learned that Vanessa had grown up in San Diego with 2 older brothers, that she'd worked her way through college, that she spoke fluent Spanish and passable Mandarin, and that she had a rescue cat named Professor Whiskerton. I discovered her passion for international films, her secret love of trashy reality TV shows, and her ambition to eventually start her own investment firm focusing on women-owned businesses. In return, I shared carefully curated truths about myself. My childhood in the Pacific Northwest, my love of obscure poetry, my collection of vintage typewriters. I told stories about my family that made her laugh, described research challenges that made her nod in understanding, and revealed just enough vulnerability to create genuine connection. What I didn't share, of course, was anything about Andrew. As far as Vanessa knew, my bad breakup had been with a man named Christopher, a vague figure I described only as someone who ultimately couldn't appreciate what he had. My careful approach was paying off. Vanessa increasingly sought me out, texting me outside of our scheduled yoga sessions, suggesting weekend hikes or trips to farmers markets. We developed inside jokes and shared references. She began to confide in me about work frustrations and family dynamics, but I was careful not to push the relationship beyond friendship too quickly. The groundwork needed to be solid, the trust complete. Meanwhile, Andrew continued his sporadic attempts to contact me. A text suggesting dinner to catch up properly, an email asking if I was doing okay, and mentioning that he still had some of my books at his apartment. I responded to none of them, allowing his imagination to fill the silence. It was during our 4th week of friendship when Vanessa finally mentioned him. We were at a small wine bar she'd suggested, sharing a cheese plate and a bottle of Syrah, when she sighed after checking a text message. "Everything okay?" I asked, noting her furrowed brow. "Yeah, just guy stuff." She took a sip of wine. "I've been seeing someone for a couple months now, and he's great in a lot of ways, but sometimes..." She trailed off and I felt my pulse quicken. This was the opening I'd been waiting for. "Sometimes?" I prompted gently. "It's complicated," she said, setting down her phone. "He was in a long-term relationship before me. They technically weren't completely broken up when we started seeing each other, which I didn't know at first. I kept my expression neutral, sympathetic. That's a difficult situation." "Yeah. He says it was already ending anyway, that they were just going through the motions, but..." She shrugged. "I don't know. I keep feeling like there's unresolved stuff there. He gets these moods sometimes, or he'll cancel plans last minute, and I just wonder, if you're getting the whole story?" I suggested. She nodded, looking relieved that I understood. "Exactly. And maybe I'm being paranoid, but I've been the transition girl before, you know? The one who helps someone get over their ex but doesn't get to be the real next chapter." The genuine vulnerability in her voice made me feel a sharp stab of guilt. Vanessa wasn't the villain in this story. She was, potentially, as much a victim of Andrew's manipulations as I had been, but I couldn't afford to focus on that now, not when I was so close. "Have you talked to him about these concerns?" I asked, swirling the wine in my glass. "I've tried," she said. "He gets defensive, says I'm creating problems where there aren't any, that his ex is totally out of the picture." I nodded slowly. Men often say what they think will end the uncomfortable conversation fastest, not what's actually true. God, isn't that the truth? She laughed, though it didn't reach her eyes. "Anyway, enough about my relationship drama. I didn't mean to dump all that on you." "Please," I waved away her concern. "What are friends for? And besides, I've certainly unloaded my share on you." She smiled, genuine this time. "You're really easy to talk to, Mia. I'm glad we met." "Me too," I said, and was surprised to realize I meant it. Later that evening, as we walked to our cars, Vanessa hugged me goodbye, a warm, lingering embrace that spoke of growing comfort and affection. "We should do something fun this weekend," she suggested as she pulled away. "Maybe that new exhibit at the Modern Art Museum? Or hiking at Redwood Point." "Either sounds great," I said. "Just let me know what works with your schedule." "I will," she promised. And ... Thanks for listening earlier. About the Andrew stuff. It was the first time she'd mentioned his name, and I worked to keep my expression unchanged despite the jolt that ran through me at hearing it. "Anytime," I assured her. "That's what friendship is about, being there for each other through the complicated stuff." As I drove home, my emotions were more conflicted than ever. Vanessa genuinely liked me, trusted me, and I was using that trust as part of an elaborate revenge scheme against her boyfriend, a man who, from her own account, wasn't being entirely honest with her either. Was I really any better than Andrew? I pushed the thought away. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It had evolved into something more complex, a reclaiming of my own power, yes, but also potentially saving Vanessa from investing further in a relationship with a man who had already proven himself untrustworthy. At least, that's what I told myself as I continued to move the pieces into position. The following Saturday, Vanessa and I visited the modern art exhibit she'd mentioned. As we wandered through the gallery, discussing the merits of various installations, I carefully increased the physical contact between us, a light touch on her arm for emphasis, standing close as we examined smaller pieces, my hand briefly on the small of her back as I guided her toward an exhibit I wanted to show her. Each touch was casual enough to seem friendly, but lingering enough to plant a seed of something more. I noticed her reciprocating, her shoulder brushing mine as we walked, her fingers grazing my wrist as she made a point about a particular sculpture. After the exhibit, we had lunch at a nearby cafe. The conversation flowed easily, covering art, literature, travel aspirations. When Vanessa mentioned a particularly memorable trip to Barcelona, I leaned forward, genuinely fascinated. "The architecture sounds amazing," I said. "I've always wanted to see Gaudi's work in person." "You absolutely should," she enthused. "It's like nothing else. The way the buildings seem almost alive, like they're growing from the earth itself." "You describe it so vividly," I said, meeting her eyes. "You have a real gift for making experiences come alive through words." A slight flush colored her cheeks at the compliment. "Thanks. I don't usually get to talk about these things. Andrew isn't really interested in art or architecture. His idea of travel is finding the best-rated restaurants and business hotels." I seized the opening. "It sounds like you and Andrew have pretty different interests." She sighed, twirling her straw in her iced tea. "In some ways, yeah. He's brilliant with numbers, very driven career-wise, and that's attractive. But sometimes I feel like we're speaking different languages when it comes to the things that really move me." "That must be difficult," I said carefully. "Feeling like important parts of yourself aren't fully seen or appreciated." Something flashed in her eyes, recognition, perhaps, of a truth she hadn't fully articulated to herself. "It is," she admitted. "Don't get me wrong, there are good things too. The physical chemistry is definitely there. But sometimes I wonder if that's enough for the long term, you know?" I nodded, fighting to keep my expression neutral at the mention of her physical relationship with Andrew. "Chemistry is important, but so is connection on other levels." "Exactly," she said, looking relieved that I understood. "Anyway, I'm probably overthinking everything. First world relationship problems, right?" "I don't think you're overthinking," I countered gently. "These are legitimate questions about compatibility." She studied me for a moment, her expression softening. "You really get it, don't you? That's rare." "I've just had my share of relationships where something fundamental was missing," I said, thinking of Andrew's dismissal of my interests in literature and art, his impatience with my more introspective nature. It's easy to ignore those gaps when other parts are working, but they have a way of becoming canyons over time. "Canyons," she repeated thoughtfully. "That's exactly it." As we prepared to leave the cafe, she checked her phone and frowned. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Andrew wants to meet up tonight," she said, typing a response. "But I'm not really in the mood. We had a stupid argument yesterday about his ex, and I'm still annoyed." My pulse quickened. "His ex?" She looked up, sighing. "Yeah. I finally pressed him for more details about what happened with her, and he got really defensive. Said there was nothing to talk about, that it was in the past. But if it's so firmly in the past, why can't he just have an honest conversation about it?" "That does seem strange," I agreed, working to keep my tone measured. "What do you know about her?" "Almost nothing," Vanessa admitted. "Just that they were together for several years, lived together for most of that time, and that things fizzled out." His words, not mine. "Oh, and apparently she was very focused on her academic career, which he said made her kind of one-dimensional." The casual cruelty of this description hit me like a physical blow. One-dimensional. After 3 years together, that was Andrew's summary of me to his new girlfriend. "That doesn't sound like a very generous way to describe someone you once cared about," I observed, proud of how steady my voice remained. "Right?" Vanessa looked grateful for the validation. "That's what bothered me. It felt dismissive. And when I pointed that out, he got all defensive and said I was reading into things. Classic deflection," I noted, "making your valid concern seem like the problem rather than addressing the actual issue." She nodded vigorously. "Exactly. God, it's so refreshing to talk to someone who sees it clearly." As we walked to our cars, Vanessa made a sudden decision. "You know what? I'm going to tell Andrew I can't meet up tonight. I'd much rather continue hanging out with you if you're free." This was moving even faster than I'd anticipated. "I'd love that," I said. "What did you have in mind?" "My place?" she suggested. "I make a mean sangria, and we could order in, watch a movie, or just talk more. No pressure if you have other plans." That sounds perfect, I said, trying not to sound too eager despite the surge of triumph I felt. Text me your address? I need to run home and feed my cat first, but I could be there around 7? Perfect. She beamed, already typing on her phone, presumably canceling on Andrew. It's a date. The word choice sent a little thrill through me, not entirely unpleasant, which was itself somewhat concerning. I was supposed to be executing a plan, not developing genuine feelings for Vanessa. As I drove home to prepare, I reminded myself of my purpose. Tonight would be a critical turning point, my first time in Vanessa's personal space, a chance to deepen our connection significantly. I needed to stay focused, strategic. I selected my outfit carefully, stylish but casual black jeans, a silky emerald top that highlighted my eyes and revealed just enough skin to be interesting without seeming calculated, and delicate gold jewelry that caught the light when I moved. I applied makeup that enhanced without being obvious, a skill Zoe had helped me perfect over the past months. Before leaving, I texted Zoe, "Going to V's place tonight. Wish me luck." Her response was immediate. "Holy shit, that was fast." "Remember the plan. Subtle but unmistakable. You got this." Vanessa's apartment was in a modern building downtown, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering spectacular city views. When she opened the door, she was barefoot, dressed in fitted jeans and a loose white top that slipped off one shoulder, her hair cascading in waves around her face. She looked relaxed, beautiful, and genuinely happy to see me. "Welcome to my chaotic little kingdom," she said, ushering me inside. "Sangria is ready and waiting." Her apartment was a reflection of her personality, clean lines mixed with colorful accents, contemporary furniture alongside unique art pieces, clearly expensive but not ostentatious. Family photos shared space with travel mementos. It felt like a real home, not a staged space. Professor Whiskerton, a dignified gray cat with impressive whiskers, regarded me suspiciously from his perch on a bookshelf. "Don't mind him?" Vanessa laughed, handing me a glass of sangria. "He's suspicious of all new humans until they prove their worth." "I respect his standards," I said, raising my glass toward the cat before taking a sip. "Oh, this is delicious." "Family recipe?" she said proudly. My grandmother would be horrified that I'm using decent wine for sangria, but what she doesn't know won't hurt her. We settled onto her comfortable sectional, and the evening unfolded with surprising ease. We ordered Thai food, shared stories about our most embarrassing college moments, and discovered a mutual love for obscure indie films. The conversation never lagged, flowing from serious topics to ridiculous tangents and back again. As the evening progressed and we finished our second glasses of sangria, I carefully increased the intimacy of our interaction, sitting closer on the couch, maintaining longer eye contact, letting my laugh become softer and my voice more intimate. Vanessa responded in kind, her body language increasingly open, her gaze lingering on my lips when I spoke, her hand occasionally brushing mine when she made a point. When she got up to make more sangria, I offered to help, following her into the kitchen. As she reached for fruit to slice, I positioned myself beside her at the counter, our shoulders touching. The casual contact seemed to affect her. I noticed a slight catch in her breath, a momentary pause in her movement. "Here, let me," I said, taking the knife from her hand, our fingers brushing deliberately. "You've been doing all the work tonight." "Hardly." She smiled, but she surrendered the knife. "You're a good guest, Mia." As I sliced oranges, I could feel her watching me, standing perhaps a bit closer than necessary. The air between us seemed charged, heavy with possibility. "Can I ask you something?" she said suddenly, her voice quieter than before. "Of course," I replied, setting down the knife and turning to face her. "Is this—" She gestured between us. "Am I reading this wrong? Because I feel like there's something happening here, but I don't want to misinterpret." My heart raced. This was the moment, the pivot point in my plan. All the careful groundwork, the strategic friendship building had led to this opening. "You're not misinterpreting," I said softly, holding her gaze. "I've felt it too." Relief and something else, excitement, flashed across her face. "Oh, good. That's good." She was clearly struggling to find words, which was endearing in its authenticity. For a moment I forgot about Andrew, about revenge, about everything except the genuine connection I felt with the woman standing before me. "But you're seeing someone," I continued, giving her the space to make the next move. "And I would never want to complicate your life." "It's already complicated," she admitted, moving slightly closer. "I can't stop thinking about you." Even when I'm with him, I find myself wondering what you would say about a movie we're watching, or how you would respond to something he says. Is that crazy? Not crazy, I assured her, my voice low. I think about you too, more than I probably should. She reached out slowly, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear, her fingers lingering against my cheek. What are we doing, Mia? I don't know, I said truthfully. But I don't want to stop. The moment hung between us, fragile and charged. Then Vanessa leaned forward, hesitantly at first, and brushed her lips against mine in a questioning kiss. Everything in me knew I should be feeling triumph in this moment. The plan was working perfectly. But what I actually felt was a rush of genuine desire, surprising in its intensity. I kissed her back, my hand coming up to cup her face. The kiss deepened, her arms encircling my waist, pulling me closer. She tasted like sangria and possibility, her body warm and responsive against mine. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing harder. Wow, she whispered, her eyes wide. That was... Yeah, I agreed, unable to pretend detachment. It was... She rested her forehead against mine, conflicted emotions playing across her face. I have no idea what happens next. I'm still with Andrew. I don't normally do things like this. Neither do I said, which was true enough. We don't have to figure everything out tonight. We can just be here now. She nodded, then kissed me again, more confidently this time. Stay, she murmured against my lips. Not for everything. Just stay a little longer. I'll stay, I promised, letting her lead me back to the couch. We spent the next few hours in a state of delicious tension, talking, laughing, but now interspersed with increasingly passionate kisses, exploring touches, the gradual discovery of each other's bodies through clothes that remained mostly in place. It was intoxicating, this slow burn of desire mixed with genuine connection. When I finally left her apartment at well past midnight, my lips swollen from her kisses and my body humming with unfulfilled desire, I was deeply confused. The plan was proceeding perfectly. Vanessa was clearly falling for me, already questioning her relationship with Andrew. But I had not anticipated my own genuine attraction to her, the way her smile made my heart race, how much I enjoyed her mind as much as her body. As I drove home, my phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. I can't stop smiling. Is that terrible of me? Whatever this is, it feels important. Good night, Mia. Before I could respond, another text arrived. This one from Andrew. I know it's been a while, but I really think we should talk. There are things I need to say to you in person. Please? The contrast between the two messages, Vanessa's open vulnerability, Andrew's vague demands, crystallized something for me. This had started as a revenge plot, but it was evolving into something I hadn't anticipated. A genuine connection with someone who saw and appreciated me in ways Andrew never had. I responded to Vanessa first. Not terrible at all. I'm smiling too. Sleep well. Tomorrow? I deleted Andrew's message without replying. That night, as I lay in bed replaying the evening with Vanessa, I realized with startling clarity that my revenge plot had developed an unexpected complication. I was falling for my target. And while that might make the eventual vindication even sweeter, it also meant the potential for my own heart to be caught in the crossfire. What had started as a calculated path to revenge was becoming something far more complicated and potentially far more rewarding than I had ever anticipated. The following 2 weeks unfolded in a blur of conflicting emotions and clandestine meetings. Vanessa and I developed a routine of sorts, yoga classes where we maintained the appearance of casual friendship, followed by increasingly intimate evenings at her apartment or mine. Our connection deepened with each encounter, physical desire intertwining with genuine emotional intimacy. Vanessa was struggling with her conscience. She hadn't ended things with Andrew, though she had begun creating distance, canceling plans, initiating arguments, laying groundwork for an eventual break. I watched her internal conflict with a mixture of satisfaction and unexpected guilt. I've never cheated on anyone before, she confessed one evening as we lay entwined on my couch, a movie forgotten in the background. I always thought I was better than this. I traced patterns on her arm, considering my response carefully. Life isn't always black and white. Sometimes we meet people at the wrong time or in complicated circumstances. That's generous of you, she said, pressing a kiss to my temple. But I need to end things with Andrew properly. It's not fair to any of us to continue like this. What's stopping you? I asked, though I knew the answer would be complicated. She sighed. Partly cowardice. Partly, I don't know. There's this weird, unresolved quality to his previous relationship that makes me hesitant to create more chaos in his life. The irony of her concern was not lost on me. His emotional state isn't your responsibility, I said, the words coming out more sharply than I'd intended. She looked at me curiously. You sound like you speak from experience. I've just seen too many women put their own needs aside out of concern for men who wouldn't do the same for them, I said, softening my tone. You deserve to make choices based on what you want, not what might be easiest for Andrew. She was quiet for a moment, considering this. What I want is you, she said finally, her voice low and certain. I've never felt this kind of connection before. It's like you understand parts of me that I didn't even know needed understanding. Her words sent a complicated rush of emotions through me, pleasure at the success of my plan, genuine warmth at the connection we'd formed, and a persistent guilt about the deception at the heart of it all. Because despite the real feelings that had developed between us, the fact remained, Vanessa still didn't know who I really was. She had no idea that the woman she was falling for was the same one-dimensional ex whose existence Andrew had dismissed so casually. As our relationship intensified, so did my internal conflict. Part of me wanted to continue as planned, to wait until Vanessa was fully committed to me before revealing the truth, ensuring maximum impact on Andrew. But another part, growing stronger by the day, wanted honesty between us, even if it meant risking everything we'd built. The decision was made for me on a rainy Tuesday evening. Vanessa had texted me that morning. Can you come over tonight? I need to talk to you about something important. The message sent a spike of anxiety through me. Had she somehow discovered the truth? Had Andrew shown her a photo of me? Or was she simply planning to tell me she'd ended things with him? I spent the day distracted, barely able to focus on my research, running through scenarios in my mind. By the time I arrived at her apartment that evening, I was a bundle of nerves. When she opened the door, her expression was serious but not angry. A good sign, I thought. She kissed me briefly in greeting, then led me to the couch where a bottle of wine was already open, 2 glasses poured. Everything okay? I asked, taking the glass she offered. She took a deep breath. I ended things with Andrew today. Relief flooded through me, not just for my plan, but genuinely for her. How did it go? Not great, she admitted, running a hand through her hair. He was shocked, said it came out of nowhere. When I told him I'd met someone else, he didn't take it well. I'm sorry it was difficult, I said, meaning it. Whatever my feelings about Andrew, I didn't enjoy knowing Vanessa had suffered through a painful confrontation. It had to happen, she said firmly. I couldn't keep living a lie. And what I feel for you, Mia, it's too important to deny. She leaned forward, kissing me with an intensity that took my breath away. When she pulled back, her eyes were serious. But there's something else we need to discuss, she continued. Andrew wants to meet you. I nearly choked on my wine. What? Why? I know, it's weird, she acknowledged. But he says he needs to see for himself that this is real, that I'm not just inventing an excuse to leave him. I told him absolutely not, that it would be inappropriate and uncomfortable for everyone. But, I prompted, sensing there was more, but he's being incredibly persistent. She sighed. Calling, texting, showing up at my office. It's like he can't accept that I've chosen someone else. He keeps saying if he could just meet you, see us together, he would understand and be able to move on. My mind raced. This was an unexpected turn. Andrew actively seeking to meet his replacement. Had he somehow figured out the truth? Or was this just his wounded ego demanding confirmation? What do you think? I asked carefully. Do you want me to meet him? She looked torn. Part of me thinks it's a terrible idea. But another part wonders if it might actually give him the closure he claims to need. He was significant in my life, and I hate the idea of leaving things in such a bitter, unresolved state. The universe had just handed me the perfect scenario, a chance to reveal my identity to Andrew in the most dramatic way possible, with Vanessa by my side. The culmination of my revenge served on a silver platter. Yet I hesitated, because Vanessa wasn't just a pawn in my game anymore. Her feelings, her peace of mind, mattered to me. If you think it would help bring closure, then I'll do it, I said finally. But I want to be clear about something first. What's that? She asked, looking relieved at my agreement. This was it, the moment to tell her the truth before she discovered it in a far more painful way. I set down my wine glass, turning to face her fully. Vanessa, there's something about me you don't know. Something important. Her expression shifted to concern. That sounds ominous. It's about Andrew, I continued, my heart pounding. We've met before. Or rather, we knew each other. Confusion crossed her features. What do you mean? How? I took a deep breath. I'm his ex-girlfriend. The one he was with for 3 years before you. The silence that followed was deafening. Vanessa stared at me, her expression cycling through confusion, disbelief, and the dawning horror of understanding. That's not possible, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. His ex was named Mia, but... She stopped, the obvious fact hitting her. Same name. It hadn't even registered as significant before. You planned this, she said slowly, pulling away from me on the couch. Meeting me at yoga, becoming my friend, getting close to me. It was all deliberate. I didn't deny it. Couldn't deny it. Yes. Why? The single word contained oceans of hurt. When Andrew ended things with me, he told me I was boring in bed. I said, the admission still painful despite everything that had happened since. Then I overheard him talking to you on the phone, laughing about me, about how pathetic my attempts to please him were. Understanding dawned in her eyes. So this was, what? Revenge? Initially, yes, I admitted, seeing no point in further deception. I wanted to prove him wrong. To show him I wasn't boring or pathetic or one-dimensional. She flinched at the last word. Clearly Andrew had used it with her more than once. So I was just a means to an end, she said, hurt radiating from every word. A way to get back at him. At first, I acknowledged. But Vanessa, what happened between us? What developed? That was real. Is real. I didn't expect to genuinely connect with you, to care about you the way I do. She shook her head, standing up abruptly. How can I possibly believe that? Everything between us has been built on a lie. Not everything, I insisted, rising to face her. The connection we have, the way we understand each other, that's genuine. The person you've come to know is the real me, Vanessa. The circumstances of how we met are the only deception. That's a pretty significant deception, she exclaimed, anger beginning to replace shock. You deliberately inserted yourself into my life under false pretenses. You watched me talk about Andrew, about his ex, about you, and said nothing? She was right, of course. The magnitude of my deception was impossible to justify, no matter how genuine my feelings had become. I'm sorry, I said, knowing the words were woefully inadequate. I never meant to hurt you. That was never the point. What was the point then? She demanded. To hurt Andrew? To use me as a weapon against him? Did you ever consider that I might be collateral damage in your revenge fantasy? Her words cut deep precisely because they contained truth. I had considered her collateral damage initially, an unfortunate but necessary casualty in my quest for vindication. I was wrong, I admitted. The person I was when I started this. She was hurt, humiliated, desperate to reclaim some sense of power. But the person I am now, the person who knows you, who cares for you, she regrets hurting you more than I can express. Vanessa looked at me for a long moment, tears welling in her eyes. I need you to leave, she said finally, her voice strained but determined. I can't process this with you standing here. Vanessa, please, Mia, just go. I collected my coat and purse in silence, heart heavy with the knowledge that I might have destroyed something precious in pursuit of petty revenge. At the door, I turned back. For what it's worth, what I feel for you is real. Whatever brought us together, what developed between us was authentic. I don't know what to believe anymore, she said, not meeting my eyes. Goodbye, Mia. As the door closed behind me, I felt a crushing weight of loss and regret. The revenge I had plotted so carefully had succeeded in one sense. Andrew had lost Vanessa, had been replaced just as he'd replaced me, but the cost was proving far higher than I'd anticipated. I hadn't just hurt Andrew. I'd hurt someone I'd come to care about deeply. And in doing so, I'd hurt myself as well. The drive home passed in a blur of tears and self-recrimination. By the time I reached my apartment, I felt hollowed out. The triumph of revenge turned to ashes. I had just settled onto my couch, a glass of whiskey in hand, when my phone buzzed with a text. My heart leapt, hoping against hope that it was Vanessa. It was Andrew. We need to talk. Now, my place. 9 p.m. His tone was demanding, angry. Clearly, Vanessa had told him the truth. Part of me wanted to ignore him, to refuse this final confrontation. But another part, the part that had set this whole plan in motion, needed to see it through to the end. I texted back a single word, okay. An hour later, I stood outside the apartment we had once shared, steeling myself for whatever came next. When Andrew yanked open the door, his face was contorted with rage. You manipulative bitch, he spat, stepping back to let me enter. I knew you were pathetic, but this is a new low even for you. I moved past him into the familiar space, noting the changes since I'd left. New artwork, different throw pillows, Vanessa's influence evident in the stylish updates. "Hello to you too, Andrew," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Don't play cute," he snarled, slamming the door. "Vanessa told me everything. How you deliberately targeted her, wormed your way into her life, seduced her, all to get back at me." "Is that what she said?" I asked mildly. "She didn't have to spell it out. It's obvious." He paced the living room, running his hands through his hair in agitation. "What the fuck is wrong with you, Mia? We broke up. It happens. Normal people move on. They don't orchestrate elaborate revenge plots. Normal people also don't tell their partners they're boring in bed and then laugh about them behind their backs," I countered, feeling the old anger resurface. "Normal people don't cheat and lie and humiliate those they claim to care about." He had the grace to look momentarily abashed, but quickly recovered his indignation. "So I wasn't tactful about our sexual compatibility. That justifies this psychotic scheme?" "You weren't untactful, Andrew. You were cruel. Deliberately, calculatedly cruel. You cheated on me, lied to my face, and then mocked my attempts to please you to your new girlfriend." My voice remained calm, control giving me power I'd never felt with him before. "You broke something in me that day, but you also created something new." He stared at me, really looking at me perhaps for the first time since I'd entered. I could see him noting the changes, the confident posture, the direct gaze, the self-possession that had replaced my former insecurity. "This new version of you is disturbing," he said finally, but I could hear the uncertainty beneath his bluster. "This new version of me is honest," I corrected him, "about what she wants, what she feels, what she's willing to do to claim her power. By stealing my girlfriend? By manipulating an innocent person into your sick revenge fantasy?" He was trying to regain the moral high ground, but his arguments rang hollow. "Vanessa made her own choices," I said. "Yes, I orchestrated our meeting, but every moment after that was genuine. Every connection, every conversation, every kiss, those were real. She chose me, Andrew. Not because I tricked her, but because we had something you and she never did. Authentic understanding." My words hit their mark. I could see the realization dawning in his eyes, that even without knowing my true identity, Vanessa had been drawn to me, had connected with me, had ultimately chosen me over him. "She'll never forgive you for lying to her," he said, a desperate edge to his voice. "Whatever you think you had with her is over." "Maybe," I acknowledged, surprising him with my candor. "And that would be a genuine loss, because what developed between Vanessa and me became something I never expected, something real and valuable." I moved toward the door, having said what I came to say. "But even if she never speaks to me again, my point is made. I'm not boring, Andrew. I never was. The problem was never my inadequacy. It was your inability to see and appreciate who I actually am." As my hand touched the doorknob, he called after me, his voice strained. "So that's it? You ruin my relationship, break Vanessa's heart, and walk away feeling vindicated?" I turned back, meeting his gaze steadily. "No. I walk away understanding something important. Revenge might be satisfying, but it doesn't heal the original wound. Only I can do that by recognizing my own worth, independent of your assessment." For a moment, something like respect flickered across his features, a grudging recognition of the transformation I'd undergone. Then it was gone, replaced by bitter resignation. "We're done here," he said, turning away. "Congratulations on your revenge. I hope it was worth it." As I left the apartment that had once been ours, I considered his question seriously. Had it been worth it? The answer was more complicated than I'd anticipated when I first set my plan in motion. In purely tactical terms, my revenge had succeeded. Andrew had lost Vanessa. His certainty in his own judgment, his dismissal of me as boring, one-dimensional, sexually inadequate, had been thoroughly disproven. He would never again underestimate me or any woman so casually. But the emotional calculus was different. I had hurt Vanessa, someone I genuinely cared for. I had allowed revenge to dictate my actions, even as those actions led to real, meaningful connection. And while I had proven Andrew wrong about me, I had also proven something disappointing about myself, that I was capable of calculating deception in service of retribution. As I drove home through the rain-slicked streets, I felt neither triumphant nor defeated. Instead, I felt something unexpected. Free. Free of Andrew's assessment of me. Free of the need to prove myself through his validation or denial. Free of the anger that had driven me for months. What remained was regret for hurting Vanessa, but also hope. Not that she would forgive me necessarily, but that I could forgive myself. That I could take the growth and self-knowledge this journey had given me and move forward, wiser and more honest. When I reached my apartment, I found a single text message waiting on my phone from Vanessa. "We need to talk. Tomorrow. My place? 7 p.m. No pleasantries, no warmth, but not outright rejection either. A willingness to continue the conversation at least. It was more than I deserved, but exactly what I needed. A chance for honesty, for whatever came next. I texted back a simple acknowledgement. I'll be there. Then I poured myself a glass of wine, settled onto my balcony, and watched the city lights shimmer through the gentle rain. Whatever happened with Vanessa tomorrow, forgiveness, closure, or something in between, one thing was certain. The Mia who had been shattered by Andrew's casual cruelty was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, more self-aware, and ultimately more authentically herself than she had ever been before. If that was the unexpected gift of this misguided revenge, perhaps it had been worth it after all. As for what would happen next with Vanessa, that story remained to be written. But for the first time in months, I was ready to face whatever came with honesty, courage, and the knowledge that no one else's assessment of me, good or bad, could define my worth. I had wanted revenge. I had gotten so much more. I arrived at Vanessa's apartment exactly at 7, heart hammering against my ribs. The confidence that had carried me through my confrontation with Andrew the previous night had evaporated, replaced by genuine fear. Not of Vanessa's anger, I deserved that, but of seeing the pain I'd caused reflected in her eyes. When she opened the door, I was struck by how tired she looked. The vibrant energy that usually radiated from her was dimmed, her eyes shadowed from what had clearly been a sleepless night. "Come in," she said, her voice neutral, betraying nothing. I stepped inside, noting that the apartment had been tidied meticulously, what Vanessa did when she was anxious or needed to think. The wine glasses we'd used the night before were gone. No trace of our previous comfortable intimacy remained. "Do you want something to drink?" she asked, gesturing vaguely toward the kitchen. "No, thank you," I replied, not wanting anything to buffer this conversation. I needed to feel every uncomfortable moment of it. She nodded, then moved to the living room, sitting in an armchair rather than on the couch where we'd spent so many hours together. I took the hint and sat across from her, maintaining the distance she clearly needed. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. I didn't rush to fill the silence. That was one thing I'd learned during my transformation, the power of patient stillness. "I talked to Andrew after you left," she finally said. "He had quite a lot to say about you." "I imagine he did," I responded carefully. "I spoke with him as well. He told me I should press charges." She continued, watching me closely. "Said what you did was essentially fraud, manipulation, maybe even harassment." I flinched but didn't argue. From a certain perspective, she wasn't wrong. "Are you going to?" I asked quietly. She sighed, running a hand through her dark hair. "No. That would be excessive and pointless." She leaned forward slightly. "But I need to understand, Mia. All of it. From the beginning. No more lies, no omissions. I deserve that much. You deserve far more than that." I agreed. But the truth is a start. And so I told her everything, from the moment Andrew had called me boring in bed, through overhearing his phone conversation with her, to my initial plotting with Zoe. I explained how I'd tracked her through social media, orchestrated our chance, meeting at yoga, and carefully cultivated our friendship with revenge as my North Star. But I also told her about the unexpected shifts, how her intelligence and warmth had surprised me, how our connection had developed genuine depth, how my feelings had evolved from calculated manipulation to authentic care. "The person you got to know, that was the real me," I said, meeting her eyes steadily. "That's the irony of all this. In trying to become someone different, someone who could execute this plan, I actually became more authentically myself than I'd ever been before." Vanessa listened without interruption, her expression shifting between anger, hurt, and occasional flashes of something more complicated, understanding perhaps, or reluctant recognition. "So when did it change?" she asked when I'd finished my explanation. "When did I stop being just a means to an end?" I considered the question seriously, wanting to honor it with complete honesty. "It was gradual," I admitted, "but I think the day at the art gallery was a turning point. When you talked about Barcelona, about Gaudí, your passion, your way of seeing the world, it resonated with me in a way I wasn't prepared for. I remember thinking that even if there had been no Andrew, no revenge plot, I would still have wanted to know you. She nodded slowly, processing this. And the physical aspect? Was that all calculation too at first? I was attracted to you from the beginning, I said, feeling heat rise in my cheeks despite everything. That wasn't faked. But yes, initially I saw it as tactical, a necessary part of the plan. And later? Later it became something I wanted for its own sake, I said softly. Because it was you. Because what we shared felt real and important. She was quiet for a long time, studying me with an intensity that made me want to look away. But I didn't. I owed her my complete presence, my willingness to be seen, even the ugliest, most calculating parts of me. You know what the worst part is? She said finally. I believe you. About your feelings evolving, becoming genuine. And that makes this so much more complicated. I'm sorry, I said, the words hopelessly inadequate. If I could go back, but you can't, she interrupted. None of us can, so the question becomes, what now? It was the question I'd been both longing for and dreading. What now indeed? That depends entirely on you, I said. I would understand if you never wanted to see me again, but if there's any chance, if you think what we built might be worth salvaging in some form. I left the sentence unfinished, unwilling to presume, to ask for more than she was ready to give. Vanessa stood suddenly, moving to the window to look out at the city below. When she spoke, her back was still to me, her voice so quiet I had to strain to hear it. I'm so angry with you, Mia. For the deception, for making me question every moment we shared, every feeling I developed. She turned to face me. But I'm also angry with myself because despite everything, I miss you. Miss talking to you, being with you. And that makes me feel like I'm betraying myself. The vulnerability in her admission made my chest ache. You're not betraying yourself by feeling conflicted, I said gently. Emotions aren't logical or linear. They're messy and contradictory and completely valid. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. That sounds like something I would say to you. You have, I reminded her. When I was struggling with the aftermath of my breakup with Andrew, or at least what you thought was my breakup with Christopher. She winced at the reminder of that particular deception. Right. Another silence fell between us, but this one felt different, charged with possibility rather than just pain. I need time, she said finally, to process all of this, to figure out what I want, what I can live with. Of course, I agreed immediately. Take all the time you need. And space? She added, no contact for a while? I need to be able to think clearly, without your voice in my ear or your texts on my phone. The prospect of not speaking to her, not seeing her, sent a sharp pain through me, a testament to how real my feelings had become. But I nodded acceptance. Whatever you need, I said, rising to leave. Just, if and when you're ready to talk again, I'll be here. At the door I turned back one last time. For what it's worth, Vanessa, and I know it may not be worth much right now, meeting you, knowing you, has changed me in ways I never anticipated. Whatever happens next, I'm grateful for that. She didn't reply, but she held my gaze steadily, neither accepting nor rejecting my words. It wasn't forgiveness, but it wasn't final dismissal either. It was space for her to heal, to decide, to choose her own path forward without my influence. As I walked to my car, I felt strangely at peace despite the uncertainty. I had done what I could, told the truth, accepted responsibility, offered whatever amends were possible. The rest wasn't up to me. The next 3 weeks passed in a strange limbo state. I threw myself into my dissertation research, working longer hours than I had in months. I reconnected with friends I'd neglected during my revenge-focused period, including several weekend visits with my sister in Portland. Zoe, to her credit, never said, "I told you so," about the complications that had developed with Vanessa. Instead, she listened as I processed the aftermath of my scheme, offering support without judgment. You know what's weird? I told her one evening as we shared takeout Thai food in her apartment, "I don't regret what happened with Andrew." "You mean confronting him?" she asked. That, but also the whole process leading up to it. As misguided as my motivations were, the journey changed me for the better. I discovered parts of myself I never knew existed. Strength, confidence, desire. I learned what I actually want and need, not just in relationships, but in life. So you're saying the revenge plot was actually therapeutic? Zoe raised an eyebrow skeptically. I laughed. In a very twisted way, maybe? Though I wouldn't recommend it as a general personal growth strategy. The cost was too high. Vanessa, she said, understanding immediately. Vanessa, I agreed, feeling the now familiar ache. I hurt someone who didn't deserve it, someone I genuinely care about. That's a tough thing to live with. Have you heard from her at all? I shook my head. No. And I'm respecting her request for space. No contact. That must be hard, Zoe observed. You guys were talking every day. It is hard, I admitted. But it's the least I can do. The ball is entirely in her court now. But as the weeks stretched on with no word from Vanessa, I began to accept that perhaps she had made her decision. Maybe the breach of trust was simply too great to overcome. I couldn't blame her if that was the case, but the thought brought a heaviness to my chest that no amount of dissertation writing could alleviate. It was nearly a month after our last conversation when my phone lit up with a text from her. Coffee tomorrow? 2 p.m. at Lunar Brew. My heart leapt, then immediately began racing with anxiety. The message was neutral, neither warm nor cold, offering no hints about what she wanted to discuss. But she was reaching out. It was something. I responded simply, I'll be there. Thank you. Sleep was impossible that night. I cycled through every possible scenario, from Vanessa telling me she never wanted to see me again, to the unlikely fantasy of complete forgiveness and reconciliation. By morning, I was exhausted but vibrating with nervous energy. I arrived at Lunar Brew 15 minutes early, selecting a quiet table in the corner where we could talk privately. The coffee shop was one of Vanessa's favorites, a cozy space with local art on the walls and a commitment to ethically sourced beans. I ordered a plain black coffee, too anxious to consider anything more complex. When Vanessa walked in exactly at 2, my breath caught. She looked beautiful, rested, composed, her dark hair falling in loose waves around her shoulders. She wore a simple blue dress I hadn't seen before, and the sight of her after weeks apart made my heart ache with a complicated mixture of longing and remorse. She spotted me immediately, making her way to the table with determined strides. After ordering her usual cappuccino at the counter, she joined me, settling into the chair across from mine. "Hi," she said simply. "Hi," I echoed, resisting the urge to fill the silence with nervous chatter. "It's good to see you." She nodded, a slight softening in her expression. "You too, actually." The barista delivered her cappuccino, giving us a moment to collect ourselves. When we were alone again, Vanessa took a sip of her drink, then set it down deliberately. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," she began. "About us, about what happened, about what it all means." "I've been thinking too," I said. "About how much I miss you. About how sorry I am for the way things started between us." She held up a hand, stopping me. "Let me finish, please. I need to say this without interruption." I nodded, heart pounding. "What you did was manipulative and dishonest," she said, her voice steady. "You used me as a pawn in a revenge game I never consented to play. That's not something I can just overlook or excuse." My heart sank, but I maintained eye contact, accepting the truth of her words. "But," she continued, "over the past month I've also had to confront some uncomfortable facts. The first is that despite how things began, what developed between us felt more genuine than anything I've experienced before. The connection, the understanding, the way we fit together, that was real, at least for me." "For me too," I said quietly, unable to stay silent. "Completely real?" She acknowledged this with a small nod. "The second thing I've realized is that I'm not entirely innocent in all this either." This surprised me. "What do you mean?" "I started seeing Andrew when he was still with you," she reminded me. "He told me you two were essentially over, just going through the motions, but the fact is, you were still together. I chose to believe his version because it was convenient, because I wanted him. I didn't ask enough questions. I didn't insist on clarity before getting involved. I hadn't expected this level of self-reflection from her." "That's different," I argued. "You didn't know me. You had no reason to question Andrew's account." "Maybe," she conceded, "but it's still a choice I made that indirectly contributed to your pain. And after talking with Andrew again, really pressing him about how things ended with you, I've come to believe that he was far more callous than I initially understood." She paused, taking another sip of her cappuccino. "Which brings me to the third realization. I don't hate you, Mia. I've tried. It would be so much simpler if I could just write you off as this manipulative villain. But I can't, because the person I got to know over those months, she was real. Thoughtful, intelligent, passionate. Someone who understood me in ways few people ever have." Hope flickered in my chest, tentative but persistent. "What are you saying, Vanessa?" She met my eyes directly. "I'm saying that I'm not ready to close the door on us completely. But I'm also not ready to just pick up where we left off, pretending nothing happened. That makes perfect sense. I agreed quickly. Honestly, it's more than I dared hope for. I want to try something different, she continued. A complete reset. Not as if we're meeting for the first time, we can't unring that bell, but a conscious choice to start building something new. Something based on complete honesty from this point forward. I'd like that, I said, warmth spreading through me. Very much. No guarantees, she cautioned. I still have trust issues to work through, and we'd need to go slowly, very slowly, whatever pace you're comfortable with, I promised. Just the chance to know you again, honestly this time, that's more than enough. She smiled then, a real smile that reached her eyes. I suggest we start with friendship. Real friendship. See where it leads? Friendship? I agreed, returning her smile. Though I should warn you, I'm already pretty fond of you, so my friendship might be a bit biased. She laughed softly, the sound sending a ripple of joy through me. I think I can handle that. We spent the next 2 hours talking. About her work, my dissertation, books we'd read during our time apart. It was tentative at first, careful, but gradually the conversation flowed more naturally, hints of our former ease re-emerging. As we prepared to leave, Vanessa hesitated, then asked the question I'd been dreading. Have you heard from Andrew at all? One text, I admitted. Right after our confrontation. I didn't respond. What did it say? I hope you're happy now, I quoted. Classic Andrew, making it all about himself to the very end. She nodded, unsurprised. He's been reaching out to me too, alternating between anger and attempts at reconciliation. I'm sorry, I said sincerely. That can't be easy to deal with. It's not, she agreed. But it's getting easier to see him clearly now, to recognize the patterns I missed before. As we stood outside the coffee shop preparing to part ways, an awkward moment hung between us, the muscle memory of how we used to say goodbye, with a kiss and embrace, clashing with our new, undefined status. Vanessa solved the dilemma by offering her hand, a gesture that was formal but not cold. I took it, feeling the familiar warmth of her skin against mine. Thank you for meeting me today, she said. For listening, for being honest. Thank you for giving me the chance, I replied. It means more than I can say. She smiled, releasing my hand. I'll text you. Maybe we could try that new exhibition at the Contemporary Art Museum next weekend, as friends. I'd love that, I said, working to contain the surge of happiness her suggestion provoked. As I watched her walk away, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months, genuine hope. Not the vindictive satisfaction of a revenge plot fulfilled, but something purer, the possibility of authentic connection built on truth rather than deception. Whatever happened next, whether our relationship evolved back into romance or remained a meaningful friendship, I knew one thing with certainty. The person I had become through this twisted journey was someone I could finally respect, flawed, capable of poor choices, but ultimately committed to truth and genuine growth. And that, perhaps, was the most unexpected outcome of all. 2 months later, I stood in the doorway of my newly rented apartment, surveying the organized chaos of half-unpacked boxes and mismatched furniture. After years of living in student housing or shared spaces, this was my first truly independent home, a small but sun-filled one-bedroom in a converted warehouse downtown. The timing felt right. I had submitted my dissertation the previous week, was scheduled to defend it in a month, and had already received interest from several universities about potential teaching positions. One phase of my life was ending, another beginning. The sound of laughter drew my attention to the kitchen, where Zoe and Vanessa were unpacking dishes together, arguing good-naturedly about the most efficient shelf arrangement. I'm telling you, everyday glasses should be at eye level, Zoe insisted. It's basic ergonomics. But her nice glassware needs protection from being knocked over, Vanessa countered. That belongs on the higher shelf. You're both overthinking this, I called, joining them in the narrow kitchen. At this point, I'm just happy to have actual matching dishes for the first time in my adult life. Vanessa smiled at me, her eyes warm. Your standards are alarmingly low. I prefer to think of it as appreciative of simple pleasures, I replied, returning her smile. The ease between us had returned gradually over the past months. True to her word, Vanessa had insisted on rebuilding our relationship from the ground up, friendship first, with no assumptions about where it might lead. We'd visited museums, attended lectures, shared meals, and talked for hours, rediscovering each other without the shadow of deception between us. At first, we'd been careful to avoid physical contact beyond friendly gestures, but over time, the natural chemistry between us had reasserted itself in small ways. A lingering touch, a meaningful glance, the gravitational pull that seemed to keep us in each other's orbit. 2 weeks ago, after a particularly wonderful evening at an outdoor concert in the park, Vanessa had kissed me for the first time since our confrontation. Tentatively at first, then with growing confidence as I responded. We'd taken things slowly since then, navigating this new phase with careful attention to boundaries and honest communication. Earth to Mia, Zoe's voice broke through my reverie. Are you joining this cabinet organization debate or just going to stand there with that dopey smile? I laughed, shaking my head. I defer to the combined wisdom of you two organizational geniuses. Just tell me where everything goes and I'll remember it. Eventually. The doorbell rang, signaling the arrival of the pizza we'd ordered to fuel our unpacking efforts. I'll get it, Vanessa offered, wiping her hands on a dish towel. As she moved past me, she squeezed my arm gently, a small gesture of affection that sent warmth spreading through me. These moments still surprised me sometimes, the casual intimacy, the easy affection that had developed between us despite our complicated beginning. You look happy, Zoe observed quietly once Vanessa was out of earshot. It suits you. I am happy, I admitted. Not in a perfect everything-is-solved way, but in a real way, you know? She nodded, understanding. You've come a long way from the woman who showed up at my door devastated because some jerk called her boring in bed. I winced at the memory, though it no longer carried the sting it once had. Hard to believe that was less than a year ago. It feels like a different lifetime. It was, Zoe said simply. You're not the same person anymore. None of us are, Vanessa added, returning with the pizza boxes. She must have caught the tail end of our conversation. For better or worse, we're all shaped by our experiences, even the messy ones. I met her eyes, finding nothing but warmth and acceptance there. Especially the messy ones, I think. We settled around my small dining table, paper plates and wine glasses, the perfect complement to the simple meal. The conversation flowed easily, punctuated by laughter and comfortable silences. Later, after Zoe had left and Vanessa and I were alone, we migrated to the living room where my new couch had been installed that morning. We sat close together, her head resting on my shoulder as we looked out at the city lights through the large industrial windows. I heard from Andrew today, Vanessa said suddenly, her voice quiet but steady. My body tensed slightly at the mention of his name. Oh, he wanted to let me know he's moving to Chicago next month. New job, fresh start? She shifted to look at me. He said some things about you, about us. I can imagine, I said, keeping my tone neutral. I'd learned that the best response to Andrew's occasional intrusions into our lives was calm detachment. He still doesn't really get it, she continued. He said we were both going to regret getting involved with each other, that it couldn't possibly last given how it started. And what did you say? I asked, curious rather than anxious. She smiled. I told him that sometimes the messiest beginnings lead to the most honest relationships. That what you and I have now, whatever it is, wherever it's going, is more authentic than anything I ever had with him. Is that true? I asked softly. Even knowing how it started? Because of how it started, in a strange way, she replied thoughtfully. We've had to be more honest, more intentional than most people ever are. No assumptions, no taking anything for granted. It's refreshing. I considered this, finding truth in her perspective. I never thought of it that way. That something that began with such deception could ultimately lead to such honesty. Life is strange that way, she said, leaning in to kiss me softly. Unpredictable. As her lips met mine, I was struck by the journey that had brought us to this moment. What had begun as a calculated revenge plot had evolved into something I could never have anticipated. A genuine connection based on mutual understanding, respect, and carefully rebuilt trust. Stay tonight? I asked when we finally broke apart, the question carrying more weight than the simple words suggested. She had never spent the night at my old apartment, a boundary she had maintained during our careful reconciliation. I'd like that, she said, her eyes reflecting a certainty that calmed the last of my doubts. It feels right. Later, as we lay entwined in my new bed, sheets still smelling of the store they'd come from, I watched the patterns of streetlights play across the ceiling and thought about the strange, circuitous route that had led me here. Andrew's casual cruelty had broken something in me, yes, but in that breaking, something stronger had formed. His dismissal of me as boring in bed had sparked a journey of self-discovery that went far beyond sexuality, touching every aspect of who I was and who I wanted to become. The revenge I'd plotted had been executed, but its outcome had been nothing like I'd imagined. Instead of simple vindication, I'd found complexity. Instead of triumph over Andrew, I'd found something far more valuable, triumph over my own insecurities, my own limitations. And Vanessa, the woman who was supposed to be merely a tool in my revenge, had become something else entirely, a partner in the truest sense of the word. Someone who had seen the worst of me and chosen to stay anyway, to build something new from the wreckage of deception. "What are you thinking about?" she murmured sleepily beside me, her arm tightening around my waist. "Everything," I admitted. How strange life is. How one terrible moment can set in motion events that lead to something beautiful. She propped herself up on one elbow, looking down at me with a mixture of affection and amusement. "You're getting philosophical in the middle of the night. Hazard of being almost doctor. Literature." I smiled. "Everything becomes a narrative to analyze." "And what's the moral of our particular story?" she asked, tracing patterns on my skin. I considered the question seriously. Maybe that revenge is never what you think it will be. Or that sometimes the path to authenticity runs straight through deception. Or simply that we're all capable of both terrible and wonderful things, often at the same time. Or maybe, she suggested, pressing a kiss to my shoulder, it's that being boring in bed is entirely a matter of perspective. I laughed, the unexpected comment breaking the seriousness of the moment. "Well, there is that evidence to consider." "Substantial evidence," she agreed with a grin, her hand sliding lower under the sheets. "Though perhaps we should gather more data for scientific rigor." "Who am I to stand in the way of scientific progress?" I murmured, pulling her closer. As we lost ourselves in each other, I had one final coherent thought. Andrew had been wrong about so many things, but his most significant error had been in thinking that any human being could be reduced to a simple dismissal like boring. People were complex, contradictory, capable of change and growth and surprising depths. I had proven him wrong not just by becoming more sexually confident or by taking his girlfriend, but by embracing the fullness of who I was, the good and the bad, the calculating and the caring, the wounded and the healing. And in that embracing, I had found something I never expected from a revenge plot. Peace. Not the cold satisfaction of making Andrew suffer, but the warm certainty of knowing my own worth independent of anyone else's assessment. It wasn't the ending I had planned when I first heard those cruel words, "You're boring in bed," but it was infinitely better, a beginning rather than an ending. A story still being written, one authentic moment at a time. Epilogue. 1 year later, the evening summer breeze carried the scent of jasmine through the open windows of our apartment as I put the finishing touches on the dining table. Candles, flowers, the good dishes we typically saved for special occasions, tonight warranted the extra effort. "Something smells amazing," Vanessa called as she entered, dropping her keys in the bowl by the door. I heard her kick off her shoes, then the sound of her briefcase being set down. "That would be the coco vin," I replied, "and maybe also me." "I use that fancy soap you like?" She appeared in the kitchen doorway, still in her work clothes, but with her hair already released from its professional updo. The sight of her, slightly rumpled from the day, a curious smile playing at her lips, still made my heart skip in a way that surprised me after all this time. "What's the occasion?" she asked, taking in the elaborate table setting. "Did I forget an anniversary?" "No occasion," I lied smoothly. "Just felt like making something special." She raised an eyebrow, clearly suspicious but willing to play along. "Well, it looks beautiful. Let me just change quickly." While she disappeared into the bedroom, I checked the chicken one last time, then retrieved the envelope from my desk drawer, placing it beside her plate. My hands trembled slightly with nervous excitement. When Vanessa returned in comfortable clothes, face freshly washed and glowing, she immediately spotted the envelope. "What's this?" she asked, picking it up as she sat down. "Open it and see," I suggested, pouring us each a glass of the burgundy I'd selected to complement the meal. She slid her finger under the flap, pulling out the letter inside. As she read, her expression shifted from curiosity to shock to radiant joy. "Columbia offered you the position?" she exclaimed, looking up at me with shining eyes. "Mia, that's incredible." I nodded, unable to contain my smile. Associate Professor of Comparative Literature, tenure track. Starting in the fall. I'm so proud of you, she said, rising from her chair to embrace me. This is exactly what you wanted. Your dream job. It is, I agreed, holding her close. But it also means a decision for us. She pulled back slightly, her eyes searching mine. New York is a big move. A very big move? I acknowledged, which is why I wanted to talk to you before giving them my answer. This isn't just my decision anymore. The simple truth of that statement hung between us. Over the past year, our lives had become thoroughly intertwined. What had begun as cautious friendship had blossomed into a partnership more solid and honest than either of us had experienced before. We'd moved in together 6 months ago, merging our books and coffee mugs and lives with surprising ease. Have you looked into financial analyst positions in New York? She asked, practical as always. I have, I admitted. There seems to be no shortage of opportunities. But that's not the only consideration. Your family is here. Your friends. The life you've built. Vanessa was silent for a moment, considering. Then a slow smile spread across her face. You know what this reminds me of? What? That conversation we had at the cafe, back when we were first getting to know each other. When I told you about Barcelona and Gaudi's architecture, I nodded, remembering. You said it was something Andrew had never been interested in. And you listened like it was the most fascinating thing you'd ever heard. She continued. That was the moment, you know, when I first started falling for you. Before I even realized that's what was happening. I remember, I said softly. I told you later it was a turning point for me too. She took my hands in hers. New York has the Guggenheim, the Met, MoMA. Can you imagine all the exhibitions we could see? The architecture we could explore? Hope flickered in my chest. Does that mean? It means, she said firmly, that I love you, and that I'm excited about building a life with you wherever that takes us. Even, perhaps especially, New York. I felt tears prick at my eyes. You're sure? It's a big change. Life is change, she said simply. And the best changes are the ones we choose together. I kissed her then, overcome with gratitude for this woman who had seen the worst of me and chosen to stay, to build, to grow alongside me. Besides, she added when we broke apart, a mischievous glint in her eye, I've always had a secret fantasy about having sex in a Manhattan apartment with a view of the city lights. I laughed, the momentary solemnity broken. Well, we certainly can't ignore such an important consideration in our decision-making process. I thought you'd appreciate the thorough analysis. She grinned, returning to her seat. Now let's eat this amazing dinner you prepared while you tell me everything about the position and the department. As we shared the meal and the wine, discussing logistics of the move and our hopes for this new chapter, I marveled at the journey that had brought us here. The path had been neither straight nor easy. It had begun with hurt and deception, wound through revelation and reconciliation, and emerged into something neither of us could have predicted. Do you ever think about it? I asked suddenly. About how we started? About Andrew? Vanessa considered the question, twirling her wineglass thoughtfully. Sometimes, less and less as time passes. It's become just another chapter in our story, you know? Not the defining one. I saw him, actually, I admitted. Last month at that academic conference in Chicago. He's lost weight. Looks stressed. Did you speak to him? She asked, more curious than concerned. Briefly. It was awkward but not hostile. He asked about you, actually. Whether we were still together. And you said? I told him we were, that it turned out I wasn't so boring after all. I smiled at the memory of his surprised expression. He seemed genuinely shocked that we'd built something lasting. His imagination was always limited, she observed dryly, one of his many flaws. I laughed, grateful for her ability to find humor even in our complicated history. True, though in a strange way I'm almost grateful to him now. Grateful? She raised an eyebrow. If he hadn't been so casually cruel, if he hadn't dismissed me so completely, I might never have found the courage to become who I really am, I explained. And I certainly wouldn't have met you, at least not in the way that mattered. She reached across the table, taking my hand in hers. I understand that, though I think you would have found your way eventually, even without the dramatic catalyst. Perhaps, I conceded. But there's something poetic about transformation born from pain, about beauty emerging from ugliness. The literature professor in you is showing, she teased gently, always finding the narrative arc. Occupational hazard, I admitted, but it helps make sense of things, finding the story in the chaos. And what's our story? She asked, echoing a question she'd posed a year earlier. If you had to define it now? I thought for a moment, searching for the right words. It's a story about authenticity, I think. About how sometimes we have to wear masks to discover our true faces. About how the longest path can sometimes be the most direct route to where we're meant to be. I like that, she said softly. Though I might add that it's also a story about forgiveness. Not just forgiving others, but forgiving ourselves for the mistakes we make along the way. Yes, I agreed, feeling the truth of her words resonate deeply. Definitely that too. Later that night, as we lay together planning our New York future in excited whispers, I reflected on the strange, winding path that had led me here. From the devastated woman who'd heard those cutting words, "You're boring in bed," to the confident professor preparing to start a prestigious new position. From someone defined by others' assessments to someone who defined herself. The revenge I'd sought had been executed, yes, but its true power hadn't been in hurting Andrew or proving him wrong. It had been in liberating myself from the need for his or anyone's approval. In discovering that the opposite of being boring wasn't being exciting, it was being authentic. And in that authenticity, I had found something far more valuable than vindication. Love. Not the anxious, performing kind of love I'd known with Andrew, but something steady and true. A love built on seeing and being seen, flaws and all. "What are you thinking about now?" Vanessa murmured sleepily against my shoulder. "I can practically hear your brain working." "Just that I'm happy," I said simply. "Genuinely, completely happy." She hummed, already drifting toward sleep. "Me too." As her breathing deepened and the city sounds created a gentle backdrop to the night, I smiled into the darkness. My story hadn't ended the way I'd plotted when I first conceived my revenge. It had ended, or rather, continued, in a way far better than I could have imagined. Not with triumph over Andrew, but with triumph over the limitations I'd accepted for myself. Not with vindictive satisfaction, but with genuine fulfillment. And perhaps that was the greatest revenge of all, living well, loving deeply, and leaving the past where it belonged, acknowledged, but not defining. A chapter in a much larger, more beautiful story still being written, one authentic page at a time. The end.